Hi, I'm Dave and this is Vivian the Velocette Vogue. For those not familiar with this particular machine, some of you may remember the noddy bikes the police rode in the 60s and 70s. This is actually a noddy bike with all mechanical sensors in a party frock. For a variety of reasons it's been necessary for me to somewhat modify her because of limitations I have, and I have spent some time now rebuilding her and introducing a few variations that make life easier for me. We have the ignition key here now. That's not where it was originally. If we move round and look here, we can see a water chamber, which is the top-up system for the radiator. This is not normal for this bike, but it makes life easier because the vent was originally under the seat. Now it can be topped up directly without removing the seat. And the mudguard, absolutely nothing like the original front mudguard. The front mudguard was deep, bulky, and clearly that is a modern lightweight off-road mudguard. There's a sound reason why this has been necessary. If you look immediately behind the mudguard at the bottom, there is a black section covering the end of the crankshaft. That is a modification. Clearly the original bumper would not clear that if we had lived with it. We now look at the dash and see that we have several instruments that weren't genuinely there. Originally it was a simple on-off switch, speedometer and ammeter. Now it has voltage, water temperature, because this thing is water cooled as we've pointed out with the top-up capability, and oil pressure. Situation is that those were never original fittings. They now help me to understand how the bike's performing and the way it manages to live under modern circumstances. Peculiar addition here, it's really just a method of hiding the electronics for the ignition. The ignition is now controlled by an EC unit developed by our good friends at Minimag in the Isle of Wight, who look after these things for peculiar bikes, and this is slightly peculiar. Clearly the colour scheme isn't original. Looking at the background you can see why we have this colour scheme. She's intended, and obviously it looks similar in presentation, to the Nash Metropolitan. The Nash Metro is capable of towing a trailer, and we can take the bike and the Metropolitan to shows at the same time as a matching pair. As well as the changes to the instrumentation, the new gauges and things, the lighting has now gone to LED. We have the original position for the pilot lights, but we now have LED main lights. The reason for this is that the modern headlight system is a much lower drain on the generator. The original generator on this bike is not terribly enthusiastic when it's faced with two large headlamps. Equally, we now have indicators which are LEDs. Again, a much lower drain on the electrical system makes for greater reliability. The same applies to the rear lights and the brake lights. LEDs are now used throughout. It's taken the load from the generator from 70 or 80 watts down to 15, 20 maximum, so life's a lot easier for it. And to the real reason for the variations that have taken place so far. Obvious change, no kickstart. The bike is now electric start. It's taken some time to develop it, and it is, by anybody's standards, a wee bit unusual. If we look at the front of the crankshaft, which is the black housing here, it's extended from the original housing that existed. The reason for the extension is that contained within this cylinder section is a thin electric motor driving a centrifugal clutch directly onto the end of the crankshaft. The motor is thin, it is a 3-phase DC brushless motor, similar to what are now used in cars. Because it is a DC brushless motor, it requires a more complex starting system than a simple switch. Like all this type of motor, it requires a computerized system to enable it to operate correctly. This results in a rather peculiar starting sequence, which we'll now demonstrate. Right, the start procedure is as follows. Ignition on, magic 3-position switch, forward 3 to 5 seconds, how's that for magic? Once more, into the breech, dear friends. Ignition on, switch forward, count 3 to 5 seconds. I don't think you'll find an LE or a similar device anywhere in the world that's capable of doing that. Thank you.